My husband left me to die in the desert, but that's not even the craziest part of the story. It started with a sound I'll never forget, a deep, groaning snap, like the world's oldest bone was breaking in two. Our wagon pitched forward, throwing me against the hard edge of the seat. One wheel sank into the dirt, and a thick cloud of dust choked the air. The world went silent. Walter, my husband, didn't curse. He never did, not when things first went wrong. He liked to save his anger, let it simmer until it was ready to boil over. He climbed down from the wagon, his boots hitting the cracked earth with a heavy thud. I watched him. He squatted by the broken axle, his jaw working like he was chewing on nails. He pulled out his knife and started stabbing at the splintered wood, as if the wagon had personally insulted him. I already knew the answer, but I had to ask. Can we fix it? He didn't even look at me. Fix it? The damn thing split clean through. We're stuck. I looked out over the prairie. It was like a dead, yellow ocean stretching in every direction. No trees, no water, just sun and rock and thorns. The heat was a physical thing, a weight pressing down on my shoulders, making my scalp itch under my bonnet. How far are we from a town? My voice was a dry rasp. Walter stood up, wiping dust on his pants. Miles, 10, 20, maybe 100. You tell me. This whole trip was your brilliant idea, wasn't it? I didn't answer. There was no point. He was right. It was my idea to leave, to find somewhere new. I thought it might save us. I thought it might save him. I was so wrong. Don't just sit there gawking, he barked, his voice finally finding its edge. Get some firewood. We'll need it tonight. There's no food left, Walter, I said, my voice barely a whisper. He gave me a hard stare, his eyes cold and empty. Then maybe we'll cook some hope, huh? I grabbed an empty sack and slid off the wagon. My legs ached. My whole body ached. But the distance from him, even a few yards, felt like the first clean breath I'd taken in days. I headed toward a patch of dry mesquite, squinting in the brutal glare of the sun. The ground was cracked and alive with things that wanted to hurt you. I bent down, reaching for a dead branch under a thorny bush. And that's when I heard it, a dry, sharp rattle, a sound that vibrated up through the soles of my boots and into my bones before it even reached my ears. I froze, but it was too late. Pain, hot and immediate, exploded in my calf. It was like being stabbed with a red-hot poker. I let out a strangled cry and fell backward, the rocks scraping my elbows raw. My vision blurred. Through the haze, I saw it slithering away, a thick, diamond-patterned rattlesnake, disappearing into the shadows. I clutched my leg, gasping. The skin was already swelling, turning a sick, purple color around two tiny puncture wounds. The pain was a living thing, pulsing with every frantic beat of my heart. Walter! I screamed, my voice cracking. Silence. I tried again, panic clawing at my throat. Walter, help me! I've been bitten! A minute passed, an eternity. Then I heard his slow, deliberate footsteps. He appeared above me, a dark silhouette blocking out the sun. What the hell is it now? He asked, his voice flat. A snake, I gasped. A rattler. My leg. The pain shot up into my thigh, and I had to bite my lip to keep from screaming again. He knelt beside me. He looked at the wound. His expression didn't change. Not an ounce of fear, or pity, or concern. For a second, I thought he might help. I prayed he would. That somewhere inside that cold man was the person I had married. He could cut the wound, tie a cloth, do something. Instead, he sighed. A long, bored sigh. Well, ain't that just something? My mind couldn't process it. Please, I begged. Walter, you have to help me. He didn't answer. His hand moved, quick as a snake itself, toward the pocket of my apron. I hadn't even felt him searching. When his hand came back out, he was holding my mother's silver locket, the one thing I had left of her. I always did like this, he said, turning it over and over in the sunlight. What are you doing? I whispered. The horror was worse than the poison. It was a cold dread that was spreading through me even faster. He stood up. He walked back to the wagon, unhooked the last canteen of water, and grabbed the small pouch of coins we had hidden under the seat. He slung them both over his shoulder. He looked down at me, and for the first time a small smile touched his lips. "You know," he said, his voice casual, like he was talking about the weather. "Maybe I was wrong. Maybe you ain't the curse." He paused. "Maybe you're the offering." He turned and started walking. Just like that. Away from me. Away from the wagon. Into the endless, shimmering heat. "No!" I cried. "Walter, please! Don't leave me!" But he didn't turn back. He didn't even hesitate. I screamed his name until my throat was raw, until the tears evaporated on my cheeks. I tried to crawl after him, dragging my burning leg through the dirt and thorns, but the poison was working fast. My muscles trembled uncontrollably. My breath came in ragged, shallow gasps. The sun beat down. The silence returned. And I, Rachel Moore, alone on the cracked earth, with a fire in my leg and the man I married fading into the horizon, closed my eyes and waited to die. I don't know how long I was out there. Time had dissolved into a haze of pain and blistering heat. The world was just a red glare behind my eyelids. I dreamt of buzzards. They circled high above, black specks against a painfully blue sky. Patient, waiting. I could feel their shadows passing over me. This is it, I thought. This is the end. Then through the fog, I heard a new sound. Not the wind, not the rattle of a snake, the soft thud of boots on sand. The buzzards scattered, their wings beating the air in protest. A shadow fell over me again, but this one was different. It was solid. It blocked the sun. I forced my eyes open. A man stood there. He wasn't Walter. He was tall and lean, his skin the color of the red earth, his hair long and black. He knelt beside me, his face carved with lines that told a story of sun and hardship. He frowned, his dark eyes taking in my swollen, purple leg. "Snakebite," he muttered, his voice low and rough, like stones grinding together. He looked around. He saw the broken wagon in the distance. He saw my pathetic trail scraped in the dirt. And he saw the other tracks, a man's boots walking away, heading east. He looked back at me. His eyes held no pity, just a kind of grim understanding. For a moment he hesitated. I could see the conflict in his face. This wasn't his problem. I was a dead woman. Walking away was the smart thing to do. It's what Walter had done. But he didn't walk away. He reached into a pouch at his hip and pulled out a roll of buckskin. Inside were dried herbs, a clean strip of cloth, and a small dark vial. He worked quickly, his movements sure and economical. He was muttering something under his breath, in a language I didn't understand. He took out a knife. My heart seized with terror. I thought, he's going to kill me, finish what the snake and my husband started. He made two small quick cuts just above the bite. I gasped as a fresh wave of pain seared through me. Then he did the last thing on earth I ever would have expected. He lowered his head and placed his mouth over the open wounds. He began to draw out the poison. I could feel the pull, the strange, terrible intimacy of it. He spat a dark mixture of venom and blood onto the dust. He drew again, spat again. He worked and worked until his own face was pale with effort. Finally he stopped. He poured a few drops from the dark vial onto the wound, then packed it with a mixture of crushed herbs. He wrapped it all tightly with the clean cloth. I moaned, a sound that was barely human, but it was a sound of life, and for him it seemed to be enough. He stood, walked to his horse, a sturdy dun that had been standing patiently nearby, and came back. He lifted me as if I weighed nothing at all. I was just skin and bone and fever. He settled me across the front of his horse, mounting up behind me to hold me steady. We turned west, away from the path Walter had taken, away from the life that had tried to kill me. He didn't speak a single word. There would be time for that later, if I lived. The world came back to me in fragments, the feeling of being carried, the smell of sage and horse sweat, the murmur of a low voice chanting in a language that felt as ancient as the rocks around us. I woke up in the shade. I was lying on a pile of soft blankets under a rock overhang. A small fire crackled nearby, a blackened pot hanging over it. It wasn't much of a camp, but it felt like a fortress. A sandstone bluff rose up behind me, protecting me from the wind. A hidden spring trickled nearby, the sound of it sweeter than any music. The man was there, wiping my forehead with a damp cloth. His touch was gentle, surprisingly so for hands that looked so calloused and strong. My skin was on fire. I was burning up from the inside out. He mixed more herbs in a tin cup, boiling them over the fire. He cooled the mixture and spooned a few drops past my cracked, swollen lips. I swallowed. It wasn't much, but it was something. Night fell. The coyotes began to sing their lonely songs in the distance. The stars came out, impossibly bright, like chips of ice scattered on black velvet. The man just sat by the fire, feeding it twigs, his silhouette a statue against the flames. He never seemed to sleep. He just watched. Sometime in the deep of the night, I started to ramble, lost in the fever. He left me, I murmured, the words tearing at my raw throat. Took my locket, said I was a curse. The man leaned closer, listening. He didn't speak, didn't offer empty words of comfort. He just listened. His presence was a solid, reassuring weight in the swirling chaos of my mind. In the fever, I saw another face, not Walter's, a girl, dark-haired, laughing. I didn't know who she was, but the man by the fire did. I felt his grief, a cold, ancient thing that seemed to radiate from him in the darkness. He hadn't been able to save her, but maybe, just maybe, he could still save me. The fever broke on the fourth day. I woke to the sound of birdsong and the earthy smell of sage. The fire in my leg had dulled to a persistent ache. I was drenched in sweat, but my skin was cool for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. I saw him by the fire, his back to me. He was tending the pot, his movements calm and rhythmic. I tried to speak, but only a dry croak came out. He turned instantly. He filled a cup with water from the spring and knelt beside me. Slow, he said, his voice a low rumble. He lifted my head gently and held the cup to my lips. The water was the best thing I had ever tasted. It was life itself. Thank you, I whispered. He just nodded. You lived. A breath shuddered out of me that was half a sob. I looked down at my leg. The bandage was fresh and clean. You did this? All of it? He didn't answer. He just went back to the fire. I wasn't sure what to do. What do you say to the man who pulled you back from the brink of death? I watched him, this silent, mysterious savior. He moved with a purpose and a grace that seemed born of the land itself. He brought me a bowl of thin stew. It was just beans and maybe some rabbit, but it tasted like a feast. As I ate, I finally found my voice again. Is this your land? I asked. His eyes stayed on his own bowl. No one owns the earth. I thought about Walter. Walter, who believed he owned everything. His wagon, his money, his wife. He left me, I said again, the words tasting like ash. My husband. He watched the snake bite me, and he just watched. He took our water. He took our money. He said I was an offering. Sam looked up then. His eyes weren't sympathetic, but they were filled with a deep, knowing sadness. Some men only speak the truth by accident. A dry, hoarse laugh escaped me. You're the first person to say something that makes sense in a very long time. He didn't smile, but the lines around his eyes seemed to soften, just for a second. Later that day, I took my first steps. He had carved a walking stick for me out of a sturdy mesquite branch. He didn't help me up. He just stood nearby, arms crossed, watching. He knew this was a fight I had to win on my own. The pain was immense, but the feeling of the solid ground under my feet was better. I shuffled a few steps, leaning against the cool rock wall, breathing hard, but I didn't fall. Sam gave a single, sharp nod. Good. I looked out beyond the small sanctuary of our camp. The same brutal, unforgiving land that had nearly been my grave now looked different, clean, like a blank page. Is there a town near here? I asked. A day's walk, he said. Place called Ratton. My blood ran cold. He'll go there. Walter, he'll go there and tell them I died. Sam didn't answer. He didn't have to. We both knew Walter wasn't just going to disappear. He would make sure his story was the only one ever told, and that meant he would have to make sure I was never found. That night I couldn't sleep. The fire burned low, casting dancing shadows on the rock walls. Sam sat sharpening a flint arrowhead, the rhythmic scrape of stone on stone, the only sound in the vast silence. His presence was no longer frightening. It was steadying. "You don't talk much," I said, just to break the quiet. He didn't look up from his work. "No need." "I used to talk too much," I murmured, more to myself than to him. He hated it. "Then talk now," he said, his voice quiet but firm. It wasn't a request. It was an invitation. And so I did. I told him everything. About my mother's death. About meeting Walter. How he'd been charming at first. Then came the drinking. The cold words that cut deeper than any knife. Then the hands. I told him the story flatly without tears, like I was reading a report about a stranger. He listened. He just listened, giving my story a space to exist in the world. When I was finished, the silence returned, but it was different now. It was full. "You are not a curse," he said, his voice low. "You are not a burden. You are not something to be thrown away." He finally looked at me, his eyes catching the firelight. "You lived." I didn't cry. I think I had forgotten how. But something inside my chest, something that had been clenched tight for years, finally started to loosen. "Thank you," I whispered. He just nodded and turned back to the fire. "Rest. You'll walk farther tomorrow." He was right. Each day I walked a little farther, a little stronger. The mesquite staff became less of a crutch and more of a companion. Each step was an act of defiance. I was reclaiming my body, my life, my right to take up space on this earth. Sam would disappear for hours at a time, hunting or tracking, and return as silently as he left. But he always left something for me. Dried berries, a piece of jerky, fresh water in my cup. And I was no longer afraid of being alone. One evening, I saw him standing near the edge of the bluff, staring at a small bare patch of earth. The rocks there had been cleared away into a neat pile. I knew even before I asked. "You buried someone there," I said softly. He didn't move. "Yes." I waited. "My daughter," he said, his voice so quiet it was almost carried away by the wind. "She was 6 years old." The air grew heavy. "What happened?" He took a long, slow breath. "The soldiers came. They moved us to a fort, Fort Sumner. They called it a reservation. They promised us food, blankets, a new home." He paused. "They gave us sickness and wind. She died of a fever in my arms. I had gone looking for medicine when I came back. She was already cold." My heart broke for this man I barely knew. "I'm so sorry, Sam." "Her mother," he continued, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, "was shot by a scout before that. Friendly fire, they called it." We stood there in silence, two strangers bound by the ghosts of our past. The setting sun painted the cliffs in shades of blood and fire. "I lost a child too," I heard myself say. The words came out before I could stop them. He looked at me then, really looked at me. "A miscarriage," I explained, my voice thick. "Walter said it was my fault, that I was careless." I believed him. I looked at the small, lonely grave. I don't think about the baby I lost. I think about the silence that came after, how cold he became, like something inside him broke, and he blamed me for it. Sam's eyes, which had always seemed so hard, softened with a deep, ancient pain. "He was broken long before you," he said. He nodded toward the grave. "Sometimes we bury the things we never had a chance to hold." I knelt down and pressed my hand against the dry, cool earth where his daughter lay. "What was her name?" He hesitated for a long moment. "Lena, Lena," I repeated softly. "Thank you for sharing her with me." Later, after the stars had appeared, I found something Sam had recovered from the wagon and left with my things. My mother's silver locket. Walter had thrown it aside in his haste, probably assuming it was empty. He was wrong. I opened it. On one side was a tiny faded portrait of my mother. On the other side, the space was empty, but I knew it wasn't. My father had shown me the secret when I was a girl, a false back. I worked it open with my fingernail. Tucked inside was not a picture, but a small, folded piece of oilskin. I unfolded it carefully in the firelight. It was a map, my father's map, a hand-drawn survey of this very land, showing a hidden deep-water spring, a source of life in this barren wasteland. It was my inheritance. And suddenly I understood everything. The broken axle wasn't an accident. I remembered seeing Walter near the wagon the morning before, his back to me, the glint of a tool in his hand. The snakebite wasn't bad luck. It was an opportunity. He hadn't left me to die out of simple cruelty. He had a plan, a cold, calculated plan to kill me, inherit my land, and claim the water that would make him a king in this dry country. I showed the map to Sam. He stared at it, and a strange, dark look crossed his face. He knew this land. He knew this spring. And what he told me next turned my blood to ice. This land, the land my father had mapped, the land Walter was trying to steal. It had been stolen before. It had belonged to Sam's people. The story Sam told me that night was one of fire and blood. A wealthy land baron named Cain had wanted this territory. He hired surveyors to create false deeds and paid soldiers to enforce his illegal claim. The Apache who lived here were driven out or killed. It was during that raid that Sam's wife was shot. It was in the squalor of the reservation they were forced onto that his daughter Lena died of fever. And the young, ambitious surveyor who drew the false maps for Cain, the one who signed his name to the documents that destroyed Sam's world, it was my father. My world tilted on its axis. The foundation of my life crumbled into dust. My father, the man I had revered, was a party to theft and murder. And the man who had just saved my life had every reason on earth to hate my very existence. I waited for the anger, the accusation. I waited for him to tell me to leave, but he just folded the map and handed it back to me. Your father was a tool, he said, his voice heavy. The man who paid him is the poison, and that man's name was Alistair Cain. He paused, letting the name hang in the air. Walter's father. It was a conspiracy that spanned generations, a legacy of greed passed down from father to son. The Cains had used my father to steal the land, and now Walter had used me to try and secure it forever. The locket, the map, it all made a terrible, perfect sense. But then I remembered something else, something that didn't make sense. Walter took my locket, I said, my mind racing. When he left me, he took it, but he threw it away. You found it by the wagon. Why would he take it if he thought the map was still inside? Sam looked at the locket in my hand. His eyes narrowed. Maybe he wasn't looking for a map. He took it from me, his fingers surprisingly nimble. He examined the hinge, the clasp. Then he ran his thumb along the intricate engraving on the back. He stopped, pressing down hard on one of the swirling silver leaves. There was a faint click. A tiny hidden compartment sprang open on the side, a space no bigger than the tip of my little finger. And it was empty. What was in there? Sam asked, his voice low and urgent. I stared at the impossible empty space. My father had never shown me that. What could be so small, yet so important that Walter would risk everything for it? It wasn't a deed. It wasn't a map. It had to be something else. Something Walter believed was still inside that locket. And whatever it was, he would be back for it. We both knew it. The quiet peace of our small camp was over. A storm was coming. He won't come back with just a story this time, Sam said, his voice grim. He'll come back to finish the job and to silence anyone who knows the truth. Fear, cold and familiar, tried to wrap its fingers around my heart. The old Rachel, the one who flinched at Ray's voices, wanted to run, to hide. But when I looked at Sam, standing there against the vast, dark expanse of his stolen homeland, when I thought of Lena, buried in that same stolen earth, I felt something new, a cold, hard anger. I'm not running, I said, my voice clear and steady. This is your home. This is where your daughter rests. And this is where they will answer for what they've done. A flicker of something, surprise, respect, passed through Sam's eyes. He gave a single, sharp nod. Then we prepare. The days that followed were a blur of work. Sam taught me things I never could have imagined. How to read the tracks of a lizard in the sand. How to find water by watching the flight of a bird. How to move through the brush without making a sound. He gave me a knife and showed me how to use it, not just for skinning a rabbit, but for defending myself. I was no longer a victim waiting for her fate. I was a survivor learning to fight. I felt my body grow stronger, my senses sharpen. The woman Walter had left for dead was being buried, and someone new was rising from her grave. We worked together, moving as a team. We fortified the camp, set traps, and planned for every possibility. We didn't speak of the future. We didn't speak of the past. We lived entirely in the tense, sharp focus of the present. We were ready. We were waiting. And one morning, under a sky the color of faded denim, we saw it, a cloud of dust on the eastern horizon. They came in a buggy, kicking up a rooster tail of grit. There were two of them. One was a big man in a gray duster, a silver badge pinned to his chest. The other, sitting tall and proud beside him, was Walter. He was clean-shaven. He wore a pressed shirt and a new hat. He looked like a gentleman, a concerned husband who had come to rescue his lost wife. My stomach twisted into a knot of pure hatred. The buggy pulled to a stop. The lawman, the deputy, stepped down first. "Morning," he said, tipping his hat. "Name's Deputy Grover. This man here," he gestured to Walter, "claims his wife went missing. Says an Apache took her." Walter climbed down, dusting off his sleeves. He put on his best performance, his face a mask of worry and relief. "Rachel," he cried out, taking a step toward me. "Thank God, I thought I'd lost you." His eyes flicked from me to Sam, who stood a few feet away, silent and still as a mountain. "I see you've had help," Walter said, his voice laced with false concern. I stepped forward. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. My voice was as cold and hard as the stones at my feet. "You left me to die, Walter." The deputy frowned. "Now, ma'am, that's not the story I heard." Walter held up a hand, playing the part of the reasonable man. "She's confused, deputy. The snakebite, the heat. She's been through a terrible ordeal. I was attacked by raiders, knocked unconscious. When I woke up, the wagon was gone. She was gone. I've been searching for her ever since." He was good. I had to give him that. He was a masterful liar. "There were no raiders," I said, my voice never wavering. "You watched me get bitten. You took the water. You took my locket, and you walked away." Walter let out a short, sharp laugh. "Rachel, listen to yourself. This savage has filled your head with nonsense. You're not well." "You stole from me," I repeated, locking my eyes on his. "You left me in the dirt like an animal." The deputy looked from Walter's flushed, angry face to my calm, steady one. I could see the doubt starting to creep into his eyes. "Mr. Kane," he said slowly, "she doesn't look confused to me. She looks mighty certain." Walter's composure finally cracked. The mask slipped. "She is my wife," he snarled. "By law, she belongs to me." Sam finally spoke. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the tension like a knife. "She is not property." All eyes turned to him. He stepped forward, not threateningly, but with an undeniable presence. "She is not a thing to be owned. She is a person, and she chooses where she stands." Walter's face turned purple with rage. "I'll have you arrested. For kidnapping. For theft. She's my wife." "No," I said, my voice ringing out across the camp. "Not anymore." The deputy sighed, his hand resting on the butt of his pistol. "Mr. Kane, I think we'll be heading back to town. Your wife doesn't seem to want to go with you." Walter took a step toward me, his finger jabbing the air. "You listen to me." Sam moved then, a blur of silent motion, positioning himself between us. He didn't say a word, but the message was clear. "You will not touch her." Walter stopped dead. The bully in him was no match for the quiet, deadly stillness of the man in front of him. "You'll regret this," Walter spat at me, his eyes filled with venom. "I already have," I said. "For years, but not anymore." Defeated, he climbed back into the buggy. As they rolled away, kicking up a fresh cloud of dust, I stood watching them go. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't afraid. Sam came to stand beside me. You stood like stone, he said softly. I took a deep breath of the clean, dry air. I buried my fear back there, I said, with the rest of him. But we both knew this wasn't over. Walter wasn't the kind of man to accept defeat. He had lost the battle, but he would be back to win the war. He still believed there was something of immense value hidden here, and he would tear this land, and us, apart to find it. We had won a little time. That's all. The real fight was still to come. The quiet that fell after they left was heavy. Walter was gone, but his poison lingered in the air. We knew he'd be back, not with a lawman and a flimsy story, but with hired guns and an uncomplicated plan. Kill us and take the land. That night, as we sat by the fire, the reality of our situation settled in. We were two people against a wealthy, ruthless family that had been stealing and killing for generations. What was in the locket, Rachel? Sam asked, his voice low. The hidden part. What did your father put in there? I don't know, I confessed. He never told me. He just said it was the key to our family's security, that I should never lose it. Walter thinks it's still there, Sam said, staring into the flames. He threw the locket away, but he must have realized his mistake. He thinks you have it. That's why he'll come back. That's the only reason. If we were being hunted for a treasure we didn't even possess. A ghost. The next few days were spent in a state of high alert. We took turns sleeping. We barely spoke. The waiting was a torment. Every gust of wind sounded like hoofbeats. Every shadow looked like a man with a rifle. One afternoon, I was cleaning the small pot we use for cooking, scrubbing at a stubborn piece of burnt stew. As I scraped at the blackened bottom with my knife, I felt it catch on something. A small ridge. Curious, I scraped harder. A thin line of silver appeared under the soot. I kept working at it, my heart starting to beat faster. It was a false bottom, a tiny hidden compartment, sealed with grease and soot. Sam, I called out, my voice trembling. He was beside me in an instant. Together we worked the disc free. It came away with a soft pop, and there, nestled in a bed of old cotton, was a single intricately carved key. It was small, made of brass, with the initials AC worked into the head. Alistair Kane, Walter's father. It's a key to a safe deposit box, Sam said, recognizing the design, in the bank at Trinidad. It was a brilliant plan. My father, eaten by guilt over what he had helped the Kanes do, must have found a way to get leverage. He hid the key to Alistair Kane's secrets right under their noses, inside a gift he gave to my mother. He entrusted his revenge to me without ever telling me, and Walter knew. He must have found a letter, a journal, something that told him about the key. He didn't just want the land, he wanted to protect his family's dark legacy. We have to get to that bank, I said. Whatever is in that box is the only thing that can stop them. Sam nodded grimly. Trinidad is 2 days' ride. He will know we're gone. He'll be watching the trail. Then we won't take the trail, I said, a desperate plan forming in my mind. We'll go through the canyons, the way your people used to travel. It was a dangerous, almost impossible route, but it was our only chance. That night we packed what little we had. Water, dried meat, and the key. As we were about to leave, I walked over to Lena's grave. I placed a smooth white stone on the small mound, a silent promise. We were not just fighting for our lives, we were fighting for hers too. We moved under the cover of darkness, two ghosts slipping through a landscape of stone and shadow. Sam led the way, his knowledge of the treacherous terrain the only thing keeping us alive. We climbed rock faces that seemed sheer and impassable, squeezed through crevices barely wide enough for our shoulders, and waded through icy, waist-deep streams that flowed in the dark hearts of the canyons. On the second day, we saw them, a party of 4 riders on the ridge above us. Walter was leading them. They were scouring the main trail, looking for us. We froze, pressing ourselves into the shadows of an overhang, hardly daring to breathe. They passed right over us, never knowing we were there. That was when I knew we were going to make it. The land that was meant to be my tomb had become my shield. We reached Trinidad just after dawn on the 3rd day, exhausted, filthy, but alive. The town was just waking up. We looked like beggars, and people stared as we walked down the main street toward the solid stone edifice of the Trinidad Bank. My heart hammered against my ribs as I walked up to the teller. I presented the key. The man looked at it, then at my ragged appearance, his face a mask of suspicion. "I need to see the manager," I said, my voice steady, channeling a strength I didn't know I possessed. "It concerns the account of Alistair Kane." The mention of that name changed everything. The manager, a small, nervous man named Peters, ushered us into his office immediately. He looked at the key, his hands trembling slightly. "This box," he stammered, "hasn't been opened in 20 years. We had instructions from Mr. Kane himself. No one was to touch it." He led us down into the vault. The air was cool and smelled of old paper and money. He unlocked a small, heavy box and slid it onto a table. With trembling fingers, I lifted the lid. It was filled with documents, ledgers, letters, and signed affidavits. My father, it turned out, had spent the last years of his life gathering proof. Proof of everything. The illegal land grabs, the bribes paid to government officials, the orders that led to the deaths of Sam's people. But there was one document at the very bottom that made my blood run cold. It was the original legal deed to the land, and it wasn't signed over to Alistair Kane. It was signed over, legally and properly, to Walter. But it was dated 2 weeks from now, and the signature at the bottom, the one transferring the property, was mine. It was a forgery. A perfect, undeniable forgery. Walter's plan wasn't just to kill me. His plan was to have me legally sign everything over to him and then kill me. He had the document ready. All he needed was my death to put it into effect. We had him. We had it all. We gathered the papers and walked out of the bank, blinking in the sudden sunlight. And standing there, right in the middle of the street, blocking our path, was Walter. He wasn't alone. He had his 3 hired guns with him, and they all had their pistols drawn. "I knew you'd come here," Walter said, a triumphant sneer on his face. "Did you find what you were looking for, my dear? Give me the box." The street went silent. People scrambled for cover. It was just us, them, and the truth in a metal box. "It's over, Walter," I said, holding the box tight against my chest. "It's all in here. Everything your family did." "It's never over," he snarled. "Not until I have what's mine." He nodded to his men. "Kill the Indian. Bring me the woman in the box." Time slowed down. I saw the flash of hammers being pulled back. I saw the hate in Walter's eyes. But Sam didn't move. He just stood there, calm and centered. Then from the doorway of the sheriff's office behind Walter, a voice boomed out. "I don't think so, Mr. Kane." It was Deputy Grover, and he wasn't alone. He had 6 deputies with him, all with rifles leveled at Walter and his men. Grover had doubted Walter's story. He had ridden out to the camp after dropping him off, found it empty, and seen our tracks leading into the canyons. He knew something was wrong. He had ridden all the way to Trinidad, suspecting we might be going for help. Walter was trapped. His men, seeing the impossible odds, dropped their guns. But Walter was not a man who knew how to lose. With a wild cry of rage, he drew his own pistol and lunged for me. He never made it. Sam moved like lightning. He wasn't a fighter, not by choice. He was a man of peace. But in that moment, he moved to protect me. He stepped in front of me, grabbing Walter's gun hand, twisting it. The gun fired, the bullet harmlessly hitting the dust. They wrestled for a moment, a whirlwind of desperation and quiet strength. And then it was over. Sam stood over Walter, who lay gasping in the dirt, his arm bent at an unnatural angle. The deputies swarmed in, clapping Walter in irons. I looked at Sam, my heart in my throat. He wasn't even breathing hard. He just looked at me, a question in his eyes. "Are you all right?" I nodded, clutching the box that held our justice. Yes. For the first time in a very long time, I was. The Kane family empire, built on a foundation of lies and blood, came crashing down. The documents in the box were undeniable. Walter and his cronies were sent to prison for a very long time. The government, faced with irrefutable proof of the original fraud, returned the deed to Sam's land. It wasn't a victory for his people. Too much had been lost for that. But it was a beginning. It was an acknowledgement. It was justice. Sam could have gone back, become a leader. But he chose to stay on the bluff, where Lena was buried, and I chose to stay with him. We didn't talk about it. We didn't make plans or promises. We just started building. We built a new solid shelter next to the old lean-to. We planted a garden, coaxing life from the stubborn soil. We took the broken pieces of our past and side by side, we built something new. People say love grows where you least expect it. But what grew between us on that quiet bluff was something deeper than that. It was a respect forged in fire, a trust earned in the face of death, a partnership of two souls who had been to hell and found their way back, together. My husband had left me in the dirt thinking he was burying me. He didn't realize he was planting a seed. And in that barren, poisoned ground, under the watchful eyes of the mountains and the endless sky, something beautiful, something strong, something true finally began to grow. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of survival and justice, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world and allows me to keep sharing these stories with all of you. Thank you for listening.